Redemption, kids. My name is Pastor Robin. This is my friend Planty. He is currently reading something. Do you want to say something? Yeah? Are you reading? About Elijah? Cool. Oh, you need some privacy? You want me to leave now? Alright, Planty. I'll talk to you later. Planty's reading right now. But I want to show you something very, very cool today. I want to show you the Tower of Redemption. Did you guys know that we had a tower here at the church? Today's lesson is about a tower. Not the Tower of Redemption, but the Tower of Babel. And the lesson for today talks about that. But first, I want to make sure you see our tower that we have. Ready? See, we have this up here to clean the windows up there. So our purpose for this was to clean things, clean windows. But the lesson we're going to talk about, they built something so tall and so big, but they made it for the wrong purpose. But before we learn the lesson, how many of you want me to climb this Tower of Redemption? Anyone? Okay, I'll do it. We did it. We climbed the Tower of Redemption. I can see everything from here. I can see your house. I can see my house. Yeah, those are little people that I see from up here. And so it took me a while, and now I'm kind of nervous to go down, but we'll go down. We'll learn about the Tower of Babel and how it's totally different than the tower that I just climbed. And don't ever do this at home, and don't try to do this at church either, okay? Well, let's start our lesson. Well, I thought we can start with a recap of our unit of God creating everything. Right, in the beginning, God created everything for His glory. He made people in His image. And when sin entered the world through Adam and Eve, God revealed His plan to bring people back to Himself, right, through His Son, Jesus. And our key passage for this whole session has been Colossians 1:16 and 17. And a big picture question for this whole unit is we're trying to figure out who is God, right? Who is God? And we know that God is our creator and king, right? God is our creator and king. Our first session was about God creating the world in Genesis 1 and how God created everything, and everything He created was good. Our second session was about God creating people, right, from Genesis 1 and 2. Where God created everything, and everything He created was good, and then God created people in His own image. And remember that He loves us. And then in the third session in Genesis chapter 3, sin entered the world. You guys remember that? How sin meaning missing the mark when I was trying to play basketball and I kept missing it? When we're disobeying God? And the point of Genesis 3 and the point of that session was that Adam and Eve broke God's law and their sin separated them from God. And last week we looked at Noah and the ark, right? Noah and the ark from Genesis 6 through 9. And God punished sin but chose to rescue Noah and his family, right? God punished sin but chose to rescue Noah and his family. And this week, today, we're going to look at Genesis chapter 11, the Tower of Babel, right? And the point of the story is that people tried to build a tower to glorify themselves instead of God. Right? Their purpose was twisted. They were trying to build up for themselves. They're trying to reach God. They're trying to be God, just like we saw in Genesis chapter 3. And this story, it included a big, big tower. And like I said, one thing we need to keep in mind while we learn the story is our big picture question, okay? I just said it. Do you guys remember it? Who is God? God is our creator and king. Okay, I want you to say that with me. Who is God? God is our creator and king. And that means that God created each of us and all the beautiful things in the world that we can enjoy. He deserves our worship because of who he is. And just like the recap that I just said, we've seen time after time, after God creating the world, it didn't take long for people to choose sin and throw the world into chaos. And last week we learned that how sin spread and God decided to flood the earth to punish sin. But because God is merciful and loving, right? Who did he choose to save? He chose to save Noah and his family through what? A big boat, right? It's through the ark. And this week we'll learn about the continued effects of sin after the flood. God wanted people to spread around the world and have big families to bear. Right? His image, to glorify him and through his image. But they decided to do things differently. And our story today is called the Tower of Babel. And open your Bibles to Genesis 11, and we'll read the story together. Ready? Genesis 11 says that after the great flood, God told Noah and his sons to grow their families and fill the earth. Noah's sons and their wives had children. Their families grew and the people started to travel through the land. And at this time, everyone in the world spoke the same language. One day, the people, they traveled through a valley, and they liked it there, and they decided to stay. They said, we don't want to be scattered all over the earth, they said. Let's build a city and a tower so big that it touches the sky. The tower will make us famous. The people were not doing what God had told them to do. They wanted to be as important as God. They were saying, look how great we are, instead of saying, look how great God is. They wanted to glorify themselves instead of God. But God is greater than anyone. Right? God created people to give glory to him alone. And the people made bricks out of clay and baked them in fire to make stones. And then they used the stones to start building the tower brick by brick. And God came down to look at the tower, and God said, if they're doing this, they will keep thinking of more bad things to do. This is a bad thing. They were disobeying God. And so God mixed up the people's words. And instead of everyone speaking the same language, everyone spoke different languages. When people tried to make plans, they could not understand what other people were saying. If one workman said, hand me another brick, nobody else knew what he wanted. And the people had to stop building the city. Families had to move away from each other to live with people that they can understand. And God made it so the people did just what He had told them to do after the flood. They were scattered all over the world. The city with the unfinished tower was called Babel. The city was called Babel. See, people chose to give glory to themselves instead of God. They ignored God's plan. So God confused their language and scattered the people all over the earth. But our hope is that one day Jesus will gather together all of God's people. Or when Jesus comes, people from every tribe and people who speak of all kinds of language, and they will all worship Him together. And if you remember, one of the first commands God gave people, right, besides the command about not eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? That's one of the first command. It was a command to have lots of kids and fill the earth. And God repeated that command to Noah's family when they got off the ark. But before long, the people decided they knew better than God. And at first, it probably doesn't seem like a big deal for people to say, hey, this spot is pretty nice. Let's just stay here. But that attitude was directly the opposite of what God told them to do. So even though the people thought it was not a big deal, it was a big deal because they disobeyed God. And anytime we disobey God, anytime we disobey the Bible, it's a big deal because we're disobeying God. And instead of staying at a spot or leaving a spot, the attitude was directly the opposite of what God told them to do, right? They decided to build a tower specifically to avoid being spread across the earth. And the Bible tells us that they wanted to make a name for themselves, which is another way of saying that they wanted to make themselves look strong, powerful, and good. See, they wanted to be famous. And the problem wasn't necessarily that they wanted a tower, it's that the people try to build a tower to glorify themselves instead of God. And so what does that have to do with our big picture question and answer? Well, we've discussed that God is our creator and king, right? But that means that only God deserves glory. Right? If He is the creator and king, we are not supposed to be a creator and king. We're supposed to give God the honor and glorify. We should be obedient to Him. It means that we owe Him our praise and our obedience. He knows what is best and always does what is good. And there's some commands in the Bible that we might not understand yet, and we're trying to understand. You might be trying to understand. But know that God's command is for our good. The law, the rules that He puts down is ultimately to protect us. Just like we're not supposed to be running on the street or go somewhere by ourselves because our parents might tell us not to. It's because they're trying to protect us. And God, in the same way as being our creator and king, He's trying to protect us. And so he knows what is best and always does what is good. Basically, people chose to give glory to themselves instead of God. They ignored God's plan, so God confused their language and scattered the people all over the earth. But remember that Jesus will come and gather together all of God's people, right? So does that mean it's a sin to build tall towers or to be famous? Not always. But if you desire to do things to bring yourself glory instead of giving God glory, then you're missing out on the wonderful purpose. The wonderful purpose God has for you. See, God created us to love Him and glorify Him. But we need help. Each of us is born with sin and cannot glorify God on our own. That's why God sent Jesus to save us. Our key passage reminds us that Jesus wasn't created, but was with God during creation. He is our helper, right? He is the eternal Son of God. And all of creation was made by Him to glorify Him. We saw in Genesis 11 that people tried to build a tower to glorify themselves instead of God. Right? And we remember that God is our creator and king. They built a tower because they wanted to do it their way. But God deserves us to follow in obedience and do it His way because He knows what is best. The tower wasn't wrong, but the purpose of why they were building a tower was wrong. Well, I've got some questions for you guys to answer. Some good questions. Try to think through them, and maybe you need to listen to the story again, or have someone read Genesis 11 to you, or read it by yourselves, and try to really find the answers to understand, right? God always does what is good and right. And it's that reason that God protects us and things happen according to His will. So go ahead and do those questions. I got some activities, some songs about God being our creator for you as well. Sing that, and a Bible verse for you to memorize this week. Like every week, if you memorize that Bible verse, send a video and send it to me, and I will give you something, okay? So go do that. Remember that God loves you, that I love you, and we'll see you guys next week.